afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for your time today. We're going to be having some interesting conversations around redistricting in Michigan. My name is Sophia Chu, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Community Service Center. We support, empower, and advocate for Caribbean nationals in the Americas. Today, we will be discussing, in particular, how our communities can get involved with and be a part of the process as it regards the redistricting of Michigan. One of the things I wanted to bring to your attention is how the Caribbean community fits into the fabric of Michigan. Some of the fun facts about Caribbean people in Michigan is we're not really accounted for in any censuses due to the multiplicity and diversity in our ethnicity. We're Black, we're white, we're Asian, we are of 2 or more races, and we are persons of Hispanic and Latino origin. So because of that fact, we really don't have a single box to check on the census. And due to that fact, it's very hard for us to get data sometimes as it regards marketing and to show the depth of our community. I'm asking that you mute yourself if you're not actively speaking. I think that may be Ray. Oh, mute yourself if you're not actively speaking so we can kind of focus on the conversation at hand and use the chat for any questions or comments that you have prior to us getting to the question and answering session. So our panel discussion today has a couple players. One being one of the directors of the Caribbean Community Service Center, Robert Chimkowski. He is a part of the team that works with the Michigan Nonprofit Association on the redistricting project. So Robert, if you could just tell us a little bit about redistricting itself before we continue the conversation.
Okay, thanks, Sophia. I just wanted to set the table on what this all means. So Michigan and each state gets congressional representation and representation in the United States Senate, and that composes up the United States Congress. And the Senate is composed of 2 senators from each state, regardless of population size. So there's 50 states, 100 senators. Our senators in Michigan are Debbie Stabenow and Gary Peters. So finding the size of the number of senators is no issue because everybody gets 2. However, when it comes to the United States House of Representatives, that's a different issue. So each state gets at least 1 US representative regardless of size. And there are 7 states that only get 1 representative. Those states are Alaska, Wyoming, Montana, North Dakota, Vermont, and Delaware. They only get 1. However, in the other states, proportion is determined by the size of your population. So Michigan currently has 14 representatives. 7 are Democrats, 7 are Republicans. You're probably well aware of them. In Detroit and the surrounding area, Rashida Tlaib is 1 congressperson, and so is Brenda Lawrence. Andy Levin is a congressperson in Oakland, Macomb area. Debbie Dingle represents Outer Wayne County and surrounding area, and Dan Kildee represents the Flint area. So altogether, this means, this also determines the number of votes in the Electoral College, which you've heard about on the election of the president. And that's based on the size of your congressional delegation. So with 14 representatives and 2 senators, Michigan gets 16 electoral votes presently. What is happening now is because of the census, which happens every 10 years, the population is recalculated and new boundaries are set and new numbers of how many congresspeople you have are set. So when you hear the term redistricting, you can know that it's the process of redrawing district boundaries to guarantee equal voter representation. And of course, there are 47 states, including Michigan, with more than 1 representative, and those states are required to redistrict after each 10-year census to account for population shifts within the state, as well as to remove any congressional districts if they're not necessary. Population shifts occur as people move in and move out and are born and die. Redistricting is the process of redrawing district boundaries to comply with federal standards concerning equal population and the Voting Rights Act. The new redistricting process in Michigan also has a criteria that must be honored in redistricting. And later on, Haig or Sean will talk about that new aspect of Michigan's redistricting. So that's just tried to give you a definition of what redistricting is and how those congressional maps and how you choose your state, United States representatives are selected. So Sophia, that takes care of that.
Thank you, Robert. So again, one of the things we talk about is please ensure that your mic is on mute if you're not speaking. I'm getting a reverb. Thank you. So one of the things I want us to keep present in our mind is the census means so much to us. So we have to ensure that we get counted each time and our family members get counted each time, because these are the times that it play out, makes us realize that, man, we should have been counted, but we weren't, because our voice means so much in the process when it comes to taking care of our families, where we live, the kind of services we need, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to ask Senator Geis to bring us present day and to explain to us why it's critical from a political or an elected official standpoint, why it means so much for us to be a part of this process. But I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then she can give you the full gambit of her story, and then kind of bring it to us why we need to be involved, why we need to ensure that we teach our children to be involved, because what we're doing is setting precedents for what our futures and their futures will look like. The granddaughter of Panamanian immigrants, Senator Geis had spent most of her adult life in Michigan after moving to the state from the East Coast almost 20 years ago. In the Michigan State Senate, she currently serves as the Democratic Caucus Chair. She is the Executive Vice Chair of the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus and sits on the Senate Standing Committee of Insurance and Banking, Transportation and Infrastructure, Education and Economic and Small Business Development. So that's a mouthful, Senator Geis. I want you to break it down for us, how you serve our communities. And I am so happy really to talk to you because, you know, if we see her, we can be her. Not only do you represent the Caribbean region, but you also represent Black immigrants and Black Americans. And it's amazing to see you and to look at your bio, which is just on paper, right? About the fantastic role that you're playing to represent us. So I'm going to get off the podium now and leave you to take care of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. And it's my honor and pleasure to be here with everybody. Yes, I'm Erica Geis, State Senator from the 6th Senate District. And the 6th Senate District is composed of Taylor, Romulus, Van Buren, Belleville, Flat Rock, Rockwood, Sumter Township, Huron Township, Westland, and most of Brownstown. So 10 communities in the 6th Senate District, and I serve one of 38 Senate districts. And it gets a little confusing sometimes because the names for the terms that we use for our state offices are the same names as our US offices. So in the state of Michigan, we have 38 state Senate districts and 110 House districts. So they are state representatives. And my district, my Senate district, the Senate district that I serve, I should say, overlaps with 2 congressional districts. So the 12th congressional district, which is represented by, in Washington, by Debbie Dingell, and also the 13th congressional district, which is represented in Washington by Rashida Tlaib. Our Senate districts overlap with congressional districts and also overlap with House districts. And I overlap with 6 House districts, either in full or in part. And the reason why redistricting is also important for the state level, while our district numbers will not change based on population, the number of districts, I should say, will not change based on population. The way the lines are drawn will change. And in the past, up until the 2018 ballot proposal, which was proposal 2, that passed overwhelmingly, that was the Voters Not Politicians ballot proposal. And that is what changed, what took redistricting out of the hands of the legislature and put it in the hands of a nonpartisan redistricting commission, which I know we will talk more about later in this program. And the reason that's important is that it's the majority party that draws those lines. And right now, we have a divided mixed government with a Democratic executive branch, a Republican legislature in both chambers. And so what happens when you have legislators drawing the lines, you get what's called gerrymandering. And rather than it being really looking about where do communities align, how many people are in those communities, and how do you make the communities not only match up with the Voting Rights Act and the Civil Rights Acts, but so that you don't have these crazy jigsaw puzzle looking pieces for districts, for congressional, for House districts, and for Senate districts. Now, what's different about redistricting and how it relates to the census is that the census is that snapshot in time of every single man, woman, and child living in the community. So, for example, children under 18 cannot vote. So they can't go and choose me or someone else who's running for office to be their elected representative in whichever seat of government it is. However, they are counted in that population count. And in that, when you're doing that census count, it also counts people whether they are registered to vote or not, whether they are citizens, whether they have green card status, whatever, if they're here on a work visa or a school visa, it is designed to count every person in that community. And that's why it's important. And it's important because people like me and my colleagues, my other 147 colleagues, when you count the entire legislature, are making decisions that impact the lives of individuals and community. We also, not just in terms of the laws that we write or vote on or co-sponsor, but also the appropriations. So, and which is super fancy way of saying the budget and the money that's drawn down that goes to communities and goes to services. And that's important for how your smaller units of government, so your city government, your township government, how money gets allocated to them and how they are able to utilize those things that are as simple as whether or not you're having recycling and trash pickup, or whether your local roads are getting repaved. We also control the school budgets, the school aid fund, and it determines how we are allocating those funds to our public school systems, as well as our 15 institutions of higher ed, our universities and colleges, and our community colleges. And so when you think about all of that money that comes in to have those things that are basically perform a community service back to the taxpayers, our priorities, our budget, I should say, is a living document of our priorities and our values. And so by making sure that people are able to choose folks to represent them in office who are going to have the priorities that are aligned with making sure that that people in our communities and our communities are strong, and people are able to not just survive but thrive. That is why redistricting and being involved in the process is so important. And this, with our new redistricting commission, one of the things that was part of that law that passed on the ballot initiative was that there will be, once they have determined what the map will look like, or maps might look like, is for them to do public hearings. And it's important for folks to get involved in that so that they can have a say in what those maps could look like at the end. And that will determine what the district numbers will be in the next election in 2022 for the House of Representatives and Congress, as well as the Michigan State House and the Michigan State Senate.
Okay, thank you, Senator Geist. So one of the things that's really interesting about us in the Caribbean community is we don't have a set community or an area that we all live in or can call our own per se. We're kind of in different areas. So that's one of the things that's very unique about us. And how can our voices then be heard collectively based on the fact that we're not in any one district? And I'm not sure how we as a community can address that, but it's something that we have to be aware of moving forward when we decide if we're going to move to a different community or we're going to go to church in a particular area. So it's always good to have conversations like this so we can make educated decisions when it comes to where we're going to raise our families. Where will our voices be heard? How can we come together as a group of people to ensure that our needs are met? So I'm going to turn it over now to Haig, who is the Michigan Redistricting aficionado. He is the director of New Michigan Media. In addition, he also is a professor at Wayne State University and a co-chair of the City of Detroit Immigration Task Force. So him and I are in the same room a lot of times to ensure that our collective voices are heard. But now I'm going to turn it over to Haig, who will kind of tell us about the commission itself, kind of explain to us what the next steps are and why we need to ensure that we are at the table, are a part of the conversation and passing the correct information to our community so our voices can be heard.
Thank you, Sophia. Hi, everyone. I think I've met many of you when we worked together on the census last year. And I'm working now on redistricting, working with the Michigan Nonprofit Association. So I think Robert and Emma will see my presentation Monday night. as well as with voters, not politicians, on an advisory role, and also with the communications director of the commission itself, to help figure out how to get the word out to our communities. So I'll give you a quick overview of redistricting and focusing on some images so you can actually see what these things look like. And I asked Sophia to draw me a map of the approximate location of the Afro-Caribbean community, and I'll show that to you as well to see what it looks like across these districts. And I'm really glad to see Senator Geis as well on this call, because there are the kinds, I would like to actually ask her at the end, the kinds of things that really make a difference in our lives, based on and some specific examples of things that make a difference, to really put redistricting into perspective. Let me share my screen and go through my presentation quickly though, so I can go through the ideas of redistricting. So as been mentioned already, Michigan has 38 state senators and 110 House representatives. They make all the decisions for the state of Michigan. Well, we have a governor, secretary of state, attorney general too, but we're not talking about them today. The key people who make every decision that has to do with everything local are these 38 state senators, of which Senator Geis is one, and 110 House reps. We also have 14 congressional representatives, but also that's not going to be and the senators, but we're not going to talk about them as much either today. So the 38 state senators, here are the Senate standing committees. To give you an idea of the kinds of things that they occupy themselves with and the kinds of things that they pass decisions on, look at this list: economic and small business development, education, energy, environmental quality, families, finance, health and human services, insurance, banking, transportation, infrastructure. This is everything that we deal with in our communities. This is what the Senate deals with on a regular basis. And here are the standing House committees. Much of it is the same: education, communication, tourism, finance, taxes, insurance, transportation, health policy, the judiciary. These are the issues of judges. This is everything that we have to deal with every single day through the course of our days. And these are all the decisions that are made over in Lansing by the 110 House reps and the 38 state senators. Now, this is what it looks like when you look at where they all are from. The 38 state Senate districts are in the middle box, and the 110 House districts are on the right side. Each of these representatives or senators is elected from a single district. And so the state is cut up into pieces for each person to be represented from their own district. There are 14 congressional districts too on the left side, and we'll talk about that in a minute as well. Now, how do these districts get to be made? Well, you take Michigan's population, which is 9.965 million estimated for 2020. The census will come up with the final number. And you take this number and divide it into 14 for the congressional districts, divide it into 38 for the 38 Senate districts, and 110 for the state rep districts. And what that gives you is each US congressional district is going to have about 712,000 people in it. They should be about equal. Each senator's district is going to have about 262,000 people in it. And I'm guessing Senator Geis's district is about 262,000 people. And every House reps district is going to have about 90,000 people in it. This is how this has been divided since the 1840s. Every 10 years, these maps are redrawn so that about the same number of people is in each one across the state. How do these maps get drawn? Well, two ways in which they get drawn. One is by politicians. And that's the old way, and that's the traditional way. And that's where gerrymandering comes in. Politicians draw the maps, Republican or Democrat, doesn't matter, so that they have an advantage when voting comes. The 2010, the maps we have currently were drawn in 2010, and Republicans were in charge in 2010, and they drew the maps to their advantage. Consider this: in 2020, every statewide race, that is races that did not include districts, Democrats won. That is senator, governor, and president. But when you come down to the level of districts for houses and Senate, Republicans have a majority in Lansing. This is what gerrymandering allows you to do. It allows you to control majorities in the capitals of every state in the country if you are careful in drawing them. Look at this map down here of the 14th Congressional District in Detroit area. Why is there a little box up there on the top right, do you think? Because that's where Pontiac is. And so this is a way of putting a lot of the Black population into one district that stretches from Detroit all the way to Pontiac. So Pontiac doesn't have any effect, and it's grouped in with Detroit. This has been the way it's been done for a long time. In 2018, as Senator Geis mentioned, Michigan changed and passed a new law. And so politicians no longer are going to be drawing the maps. An independent commission is going to be redrawing the maps. This is 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, and 5 independents. They were selected from a statewide application pool, and their responsibility is to draw the new maps this year. Each map should have about equal number of people in it. They should be geographically contiguous. They should not sort of cut up into pieces. They should take into account county, city, township boundaries. Neither party should have a political advantage based on the way the maps are drawn. The maps should be kind of compact. And finally, the maps should reflect this concept, communities of interest. And this is where we all come in this conversation. What are communities of interest? These are people that share something. And they could be like bird watchers, they could be people living on the shores of Lake Michigan. But for us, we're talking about people who share cultural, historic, and economic interests, in particular on race and ethnicity. And when you look at it this way, the communities of interest for us become African-American communities, including Afro-Caribbean, including West African, Hispanic communities, Arab American communities, including all the different Arab nationalities that are here, Asian American communities, that's Bengali, Filipino, Korean, Chinese, Indian, and the Native American communities, the main tribes being Chippewa, Ottawa, Potawatomi, Ottawa, and Ojibwe. Now, here's what happens when communities don't stick together. What ends up happening is they have a much less of a voice in Lansing. This is the example of Grand Rapids. This is the Black population in Grand Rapids, the dotted area. They are split between 2 districts, District 76 and District 75. In District 76, they are 17% of the vote, that's the blue one. And in District 75, they are 27% of the vote, that's the red one. If the boundaries were drawn so that all the Black population were in one district, they would be 44% of that district, almost half. Do you think they would have more of a say on who gets elected? Do you think maybe someone from their community of interest, that is a Black senator, I mean, in this case, a House rep would get elected? Chances are much higher, yes. Both of these districts, 75 and 76, are Democratic. So this is not Democrat-Republican. This is about having someone from your community, someone with your voice, speak in Lansing. And so the Black community in Grand Rapids, in the House, being split into 2 different districts, has no voice loud enough to have a Black member be elected into the House from Grand Rapids. Both of these are white House members who are elected. So why does that matter? Of course, for fairer elections, it matters, but also it matters for all the things that I mentioned at the very beginning. Everything that has to do with our local communities is decided in Lansing. How much money you get for your schools, what kind of healthcare policies there are, small business development, family care, veterans care, children's assistance, immigration policies, and some of that, of course, is Washington, D.C., policing, public safety, banks, taxes, insurance, environments, air pollution, parks, transportation, roads, all of these monies and policies are decided in Lansing. And so if you don't have a voice in Lansing, you don't have a say in how much money comes to your community, you don't have a say in what kind of policies are drawn up in Lansing that affect your community. Here is an example in more detail with the Arab American community in our area. I actually met with the House rep and others to figure out what, this set of examples. The multicultural integration budget is a multi-million-dollar budget that gives money for social service agencies and grants for like the Arab American Museum. And they don't have much of a voice in how much money is allocated through the multicultural integration budget because they don't have much of a voice in Lansing. Mental health funding has been an issue because a lot of Arab Americans come from war-torn countries with PTSD and depression. And they have been asking for increased mental health funding and they have not been able to get it for their area. Air pollution. Wayne County is the most polluted county in Michigan. The areas where Latinos and Arabs live is the most polluted area in the state. And yet the amount of money they get for pollution or policies for controlling pollution are not in their control. The underserved community designation is a way to open up grants and funding for businesses if the community is designated as underserved, in this case, the Arab community, but they have not been able to get that designation and have been left out of these grants. And in terms of schools, 17,000 of the 21,000 K through 12 students in the Dearborn area are of Arab American origin. And yet the money that they've been asking for kids at risk or for ESL, it's been very difficult to come by. As another example of voice and the lack of voice in Lansing, look at the gray box here. This is the House Health and Human Services budget of $28 billion for 2020. $28 billion was spent last year on health and human services. It's a 13-person committee that decided everything, and one person only was a minority member of that committee. Medicaid, Michigan Child, mental health and environmental health, infectious disease, chronic disease, public assistance, foster care, child support, aging services are all tied to this committee's budget, and yet only one minority member sat on this committee last year. You are the commission then, and you have to draw the maps. Let's keep the communities of interest together. How do you do this? This is a map of our area. This is the 2010 census, and every dot on this map is a person from the census. The color coding is the following. Blue is white Americans. Green is Black Americans. Red is Asian Americans, and orange is Latino Americans. This is the actual 2010 census breakdown per person, per dot. So the idea here is to have the commission, which is looking at a map like this when it's released by the census in a few months, and saying, okay, let's try to keep the Latino community together. Let's try to keep the Asian community together, and let's draw the new district maps so that we don't break them up like they were broken up in Lansing. This is the challenge. And what we end up doing, and our voices, when they are heard at public hearings, we can end up influencing where they draw these new lines, where they draw these new districts. This is the challenge of redistricting, is to be engaged in this process so that we can have these maps drawn in such a way that our voices are heard in Lansing when decisions get made, in the House and in the Senate. I'll give you quick examples of the ways in which the maps are currently drawn so you can get a sense of how things are broken down. This is the House. This is Detroit. The dotted line, the dotted area is the Arab community. The horizontal lines are the Latino community. The dark dotted area is the Bengali community. And the gray area in the oval there is what Sophia told me most Afro-Caribbeans live, not in a high density, but spread across that area. This is the Michigan House. Just to give you an idea, obviously you can see the Latino community is split across two districts, 5 and 6, the green and blue districts. And so their voice, that's about 60,000 people there, their voice is split across two House districts, and they have less of a say on either one. The Arab community, meanwhile, is split across District 11, the green district, District 13, the blue one, District 15, the red one, and parts of the two yellow districts, 9 and 14. I mean, their community is split across multiple House districts, and they would like that arguably to be one, so that they have a much louder say, when people get elected. The Bengali community is together more or less in one district, and they should make an effort to keep it that way. Your community is split across a number of districts, but I'm not sure what kind of density there is in the Afro-Caribbean community. And this becomes your responsibility to sit down and figure this out. Where are we really? What line should be drawn around us? What kind of a district should be drawn around us to represent us fairly in the House? This is the African-American community in this region. It's obviously very large and goes across multiple districts. And this is just to give you an idea of how the Black community is spread primarily in Southeast Michigan. This is the Senate now, and Senator Geis's district is the one on the far left, the yellow district. It extends much further down than this. But you can see, again, with the same groups, the Arab community now is split across 2 Senate districts. The Latino community is spread across 3 Senate districts. And your community up here is spread across 3. I'm not sure which one you're more in, but this is, again, something to figure out for the Afro-Caribbean community, to figure out really where you are among this, the red, blue, and green districts. And so you can make, when you go to talk to the public hearings, to say, this is what the maps should look like, to be fair to us, so that our voice is heard in Lansing. This is the Black community in the Senate, similar to the previous slide. And this is Congress for Michigan, for Southeast Michigan. The Arab community down here again, across 2 Senate districts. The Latino community across 2, congressional districts, sorry. The Latino community across 2 congressional districts. And your community looks like, again, across 2 separate congressional districts. The blue one is Rashida Tlaib, and the yellow one is Brenda Lawrence. The dingle is number 12, the red one. Number 9 is Andy Levin, this other red one. And the big green one is Harley Stevens. Now, we might lose a congressional seat if the census numbers come down low. And if we lose one, our numbers will go from 14 congressional districts to 13. And this whole area will be redrawn. I mean, this area will be redrawn anyway, but it will be redrawn more severely if we lose population, because it's likely that we will lose population from this area more than the other areas of the state. And so if you take one out of this 9, 11, 12, 13, and 14, I'm not sure what it's going to look like. But each one of these is going to have over 700,000 people. So our voices are less here, but still it matters. This is Michigan Congress. So redistricting process, this is what the commission has decided. These are going to be the public hearings. They begin up in Gaylord in May, but they come down to where we are, Dearborn, June 10, Detroit, June 15, at the Wayne County Community College Northwest campus, in Detroit at the TCF Center on June 17. Warren is June 24, still in our area. Novi is June 8, still in our area. But these are the hearings that we need to be at. These are the hearings where we have to go prepared at, and these are the hearings where we have to speak up at, so that they hear our voices and we have an influence when the maps are being redrawn. This is the proposed schedule, and these are the proposed locations. So some of these might change, but we'll figure it out when that happens. So they have scheduled right now 16 public hearings to do their work. And this is the map drawing schedule. The census is expected to have its data delivered by the end of July. The preliminary maps by the commission are expected to be done by early August. They will then have 5 hearings to discuss the maps as they have prepared them. They will update the maps based on those 5 public hearings. They will then present us with a finalized set of maps on September 17. We will have 45 days then between September 17 and October 31 to make more public comment on the final set of maps, and the final version of these maps will be delivered November 1 to the state. And those will be the next 10 years, those will be the new district maps. So this is redistricting. This is, I hope, to give you a sense of why it matters. This is the timeline we're working with, but a lot falls on each of our communities to come together, figure out where we are, because as Sophia said, it's not clear where the Afro-Caribbean community is. It's all over that census map that I showed you. Arab community is categorized as white in the census. So the Arab community, for example, has to sit down and figure out really where are we, and argue that with the commission, because it's not going to show up in the census. So we have work to do in each of our communities to get together, figure out what we need to argue, and then go argue so that the maps are drawn that fairly reflect us and our voices in Lansing. So I hope this gives you an overview of the redistricting process and where we are in this. Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to open it up now for first, Senator Geis, did you want to add anything to Haig's wonderful presentation to kind of drive home the conversation why we need to stay involved in this process before we open it up for questions from our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Haig, for that presentation. Something that I think is really interesting, especially when you look at the racial and ethnic breakup of the maps that were just presented, is that there are folks who did not or might not have completed the census or might not have completed all of the data on the census, because I can tell you my district is much more racially mixed than that map would suggest. I know that because I was on the doors. Pre-COVID, we had community events, and especially, and also looking at some of the neighboring Senate districts and the House districts. Also, that map would suggest that some of those communities are whiter than they really are. So since it seems like some of us might have missed out on providing that census data at some point in time, we need to make sure that we are attending those redistricting public hearings. I'm a little sad that there wasn't one scheduled for Downriver in Western Wayne County, but maybe they will think about that and update some of those, at least one of those meetings. But that notwithstanding, it's really important because, as Haig said, it's the legislature that is responsible for not just the funding that goes to local units of government, to school, but the policies that go into law and the punishments for when you violate a law. So we, as members of the community, we need to take this opportunity to be involved in what those maps are going to look like. Also, I think this is one of the flaws, I think, of any sort of demographic collection of information, is it doesn't really give space for being more than one thing, right? It doesn't give space for really the nuanced understanding of our very multicultural community across the diaspora, whichever diaspora it is, whether it is the African diaspora, whether it's the Asian diaspora, whether it is the Middle Eastern diaspora. Like, though we are collectively, we are scattered throughout the entire state. I learned from a COVID family, we've been doing these COVID family Zooms. I learned that one of my cousins lives in Flint, in Michigan, while we were on the phone with relatives from Panama, not the phone, on Zoom. And so to find out there are other Panamanians here and that they are, as well as family, was very exciting, but I'm pretty sure that the demographic data doesn't drill down that far. And that is a detriment to our state and our detriment to our communities as a whole. So people often will say, I'm not political, I don't do politics, but that's a detrimental attitude to have. It really says, I'm not civically engaged, and we need to be civically engaged. We need to be teaching our kids to be civically engaged as well, as they're coming up and will become adults, and will be hopefully voting adults. And it's the people who put people like me in positions of power and positions to make policy changes, to make budgetary decisions on where funding goes and how it gets distributed to our communities. So that is really why it's so crucial for all of us to be involved, and make sure that our voices are heard and that our communities receive the type of economic justice, environmental justice that we need, because all of those things, environmental justice, economic justice, healthcare justice, all of those are rooted in racial justice. And that is important in order to, as I said earlier, help communities and individuals do more than just merely survive. And with the current makeup of the state legislature anyway, we end up with policies that don't recognize how important that is. And so in order to have more people in office who understand the need, and whose priorities and values will be ones that advance our communities as people of color, is only going to come from the power of the people by getting involved, and having their say in what that redistricting looks like, but then also voting, making sure that every election, whether it's municipal or or a state election or a national election that folks are going to the polls.
Thank you. See, one of the things we keep forgetting too is that we have to be involved in the process and not complain at the end. Because if you're not involved in the process, you have nothing to complain about because you didn't try to make the changes that you wanted to see done. So we cannot continue to be, what's the word, inert. We have to be active in what we want to see done, not only for ourselves, but for our families and for our community of interest, like Haig mentioned earlier. So what I wanted to do now is to open the floor up for any questions or comments. You can either put your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we will call on you. We ask that you, if you can, share your video, tell us who you are, and then ask your question.
You know, while we're waiting, I can add that the maps don't, I mean, the maps I showed you, I had to create. I mean, there are maps of the House and Senate districts, but to find a map that overlays a community over it, that's not easily available. And we need to be proactive in putting those kinds of data together and presenting them to the commissioners. You know, there is no date, there's no map for the Arab community. I had to go ask around, you know, what street are you at? I mean, where does the community end? And as Senator Guy said, the census itself is not, a lot of people didn't answer the census. You know, our region had 60% response rate. So a lot of people are going to be missed in the census. Communities have changed, and race is not enough of a factor in multicultural populations that we all live in. And so we need to be very proactive, as Sophia said, and really start putting together, you know, our community, create its identity and present it to the commissioners.
Hi, Sophia, if I could ask a question. Haig, there has been a lawsuit, or at least I think the Redistricting Commission went to a judge to ask if the deadline could be extended on when they have to submit their final maps into the state. Do you have any other feedback on that, or any?
Well, the lawsuits are, so the lawsuits are to stop the whole process. The Michigan Independent Redistricting Commission has a way of doing maps, and every one of those challenges has been defeated in the courts. In terms of the extension, the census in a normal year would have been delivered to the president in December. So December 2020 was when the census was originally scheduled to be delivered, and then once the president gets it, they send it to the states. But this year, because of COVID-19, the census is not going to be in the hands of the commissioners until July sometime. That's 6 months later. And so that's 6 months of time that they would have normally had to look over the maps, to hear people out, to draw things and so on, to hear feedback and all that. All of 6 months is lost in that, you know, in one way or the other. And so the commissioners have asked if they can extend the deadlines, because the deadlines and the laws were drawn before COVID-19, expecting December to be when the census numbers came in. And they have to work starting with the census numbers. We add, you know, our information to what the census is showing, but they have to begin with the census numbers. So they're asking for a delay. I don't know yet whether they've been granted, they will be granted or not. We'll find out though.
Okay, any other questions or comments from the audience? Okay, are we shy? You guys talk a lot all the time, asking all these questions. Now we have the opportunity, nobody's asking? Okay, so what?
Let me ask a question. Senator Geis, is it okay if I contact you at some point to get your opinion on the kinds of things that are worth adding to this sort of presentation? Was it okay if I email you or have a separate Zoom chat?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, as long as it's not like, as long as it isn't outside of what I'm legally allowed to do.
No, of course not. No. Yeah, no. It would be,
since legislators are not supposed to be involved. So.
No, I just wanted to get information from you on the kinds of committees that you're involved. I mean, you mentioned the education committee, right? That you were involved in, and the small business development community as well, right?
Yes.
And I mean, I'd be interested to know, how much money is involved, and whether some decisions didn't go your way, or if you had a louder voice, you could have had something happen that didn't happen. That kind of thing. I don't know if you're at liberty to tell us about those things, but.
Oh, yeah. Everything the legislature does is public. And actually, something that's important for people to know. If you go to legislature.mi.gov, you can plug in bill numbers and it'll show the entire history of that bill, where it's who's co-sponsored it, what committee it's been sent to, the history of that bill, whatever the bill is. You can even draw down as far as other years. So the automatic year that shows up is this current term. And you can also at the very bottom go and look at committees. You can just go to our legislative pages. So there's a lot of information. It's like the one-stop shop for seeing what's going on in the legislature. And yes, there are many things that have not gone my way. I've served in the minority my entire time in the legislature. I served in the House for 2 terms. So just as an example, in 2018, I think most people might remember before lame duck, the ballot proposal for earned paid sick leave that was trending very positively in terms of public opinion. That ballot proposal came to the legislature, and when a ballot proposal comes to us, we can do nothing and it just stays on the ballot, or we can take it up and vote it up or down. And it came to us. We in the legislature did pass it. However, and that's something that many of us had been working on in the legislature. The reason it even became a ballot proposal was because in prior terms, earned paid sick leave legislation wasn't even given a committee hearing, much less go just happen to die in committee or make it as far as one chamber, but then die in the other chamber. Or get all the way to the governor's desk and then get vetoed. Like at any point in time, legislation can be stymied. This didn't even have the chance for being stymied all the times that it was introduced as a policy, as a bill in the legislature. So the folks that had been working on it, folks like Mothering Justice, other community groups had decided that they would then take it to the people and put it on the ballot. When it came to us as a body in 2018, we voted for it. But then later, it was adopted and amended. So it was the original language that was in the ballot proposal was gutted. So while we do have earned paid sick leave in the state of Michigan, it was gutted and severely weakened from what was originally on the ballot proposal. So I was there for that fight. I spoke out very candidly against what we were doing by gutting what the people would have had it stayed on the ballot and gotten through the election cycle that year, would have had a much stronger, more robust paid sick leave law than we currently do. That was all before COVID. And so everything that we've experienced, that we've seen with COVID, and the lack of access to paid sick leave was partially because of the fact that we weakened, and I say we because I'm a member of the legislature, weakened the language that should have been enacted. So elections have consequences. The decisions that those elected make have consequences. No one could have had a crystal ball to say, there's a global pandemic coming and we need to not gut this law. Although many of us who were fighting to keep it, to preserve the language, did talk amply about just the need to take care of oneself so that you don't spread your germs, even if it's like a common cold, right, to your coworkers, or the importance of having that sick leave so that you don't pop Tylenol into your kid and send them to school when they have a fever because you can't take time off. Like, these are very day-to-day real things that decisions that folks have to make, and often it is a critical decision. People might not think that that's a critical decision, but if you can't get that time off, or it means you're going to lose those wages because you're not there, and possibly lose your job, right? Because your kid has strep, you can't, and you aren't able to stay home with them. So you make the decision to send them to school, and then they infect their friends, or their teachers, like the snowball effect. And people forget that everything that happens, we aren't in these little silos. Everything we do is connected, every single thing. And folks have to make these real world critical decisions. And that was before we had a global pandemic, and we've seen what that looks like now as we're trying to come out of this pandemic, right? So that's why these decisions of who's in office are really important. And folks, the people who are really going to get it, what it means to everyday people. The 2% at the top of the economic spectrum, they're going to be fine no matter what. It's everyone else that the rest of us should be trying to fight for.
Thank you. Yeah, we are interconnected, whether we want to believe it or not. So we have to take care of each other. And if it's just paying attention to redistricting, paying attention to censuses, paying attention to community conversations, to come in and stand up for each other, to let everybody know that we do have a voice, and we need to use our voice and be educated and educate others so we can all get better at this together. So what I'm going to do now is, since we have no other questions or comments from anybody, we're going to close out with next steps. I'm going to introduce you to Kyle Constable. He's of Caribbean Heritage. He's one of the interns that we have on staff at the Caribbean Community Service Center. And he is assigned to this particular project that we're working with the Michigan Nonprofit Association. So Kyle, I'm going to turn it over to you for you to tell the audience how to get in touch with us and what we're going to be doing next as it regards this particular project.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay. So basically our next steps are we will be setting up meetings with our community leaders. Also, we'll be having site visits to community restaurants, bar, and also participating in upcoming events. Last but not least, we will be sharing information and having upcoming discussions with our communities as well. For contact information, our email is watchusgrowmi@gmail.com. Our website is www.caribbeancommunitysc.org. And also our telephone number is 313-671-6545. Also, we can be contacted through our social media platforms, which is our Facebook, that is Caribbean Community Service Center, or Instagram, which is Caribbean Community SC, and our Twitter, which is Caribbean_CSC. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you again for joining us this afternoon. And to get the information that we have, we will have flyers and other information that we'll be passing out once we get them from the Michigan Nonprofit Association. We really have these cool, I didn't bring that with me, these cool lanyards that will be given out, key lanyards that will be given out for folks to at least start the conversations with you. Once they see the lanyards, they ask you a little bit about it. And we're hoping that you will be able to share this information with them, or pass their information on to us so we can continue these conversations, with the reminder that we all have a voice, and we do have to use this voice, not only for the elders in our community and us ourselves, but also for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you guys again so much for your time this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you out and about as we discuss Michigan redistricting.